Hi, everybody. So I've got Mackenzie Conn here with me today, who is one of my oldest, dearest friends. We have known each other since we were 2 years old, and she is definitely someone who inspires me. And I brought her on this Zoom call today to talk a little bit about mental health and the stigma surrounding mental illness in this country, and some of her own struggles with her own mental health. And she's going to get real with all of us. And so I'm really happy that you're here and that you decided to be vulnerable, because it's not an easy thing to do. And I really appreciate you being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be interviewed as one of your inspiring for your project. So happy to be a part of it.
Thank you, buddy. So let's start off by giving people some background on you and where you grew up, what your family's like, all that good stuff.
So you could say I grew up in a pretty stereotypical Southern family. I come from a pretty big family. My dad's one of 6, so I have a ton of cousins, ton of family running around. We're all in the same town and neighborhood. Pretty much attend the same middle school and high school together. And yeah, we're all just really, really close and really loyal to each other, and it's a good time.
That's awesome. Her family, the Conn family, it's like you really can't throw a rock without hitting a con when you're in the Macon Gray area. They they say it's like the Godfather. They own the whole town.
we're all over the place.
Run by Cons. So you're here to talk about mental health, and you yourself have struggled with depression for a long time now. And for people who maybe aren't familiar with depression, what is depression? What's the difference between just being sad and really struggling with depression?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people kind of get this confused sometimes. Anyone can be sad. It's the same kind of feelings that we get when we're happy, when we're excited, when we're scared. It's something that's kind of more fleeting. It doesn't last quite as long, whereas depression, it's kind of an ongoing battle. It can be a little bit quieter and you can not recognize it for some time, or you can really be in it for weeks or months at a time with that just not wanting to get out of bed, very tired, very melancholy feeling. And it's a pretty scary place to be in when you're in there for a couple of months.
Yeah, absolutely. And for myself, I also struggle with depression, which I think has been a huge part of our friendship and relationship. But for everybody out there, when did you start noticing that something was off? When did you start noticing that things were no longer in your control and when maybe you should start seeking help?
Well, it's kind of funny. I thought I had it under control for a while on my own. I think it was 7th grade that it really started being more than I could handle, and my grades in school stopped. I stopped producing the same grades that I'd always been putting out, and honestly, it was my teachers and my school counselor that saw that dip in my grades and the dip in my work level and just brought me in just to see if everything was okay, just to check. And that was when I kind of realized that maybe I need a little bit more help than just what I'm doing. So thank goodness for those teachers in the school that I attended, because without them, I don't know if I'd gotten that help, or I'm sure I would have, but they're the ones that really gave me that push to seek help.
Yeah. And so when did you officially get your diagnosis? When were you diagnosed with I have depression?
I think 7th grade, pretty much all throughout 7th grade, I saw the school counselor, and it was through the end of May/June is when I started seeing a therapist. And I think it was August that I officially got tested. Because it was a pretty long process to find a therapist that didn't know my family, because you kind of want a little bit of distance from that.
And your dad is a therapist too. So that didn't make it any easier to find someone who didn't know your family in that field.
Yeah, so we were making the conscious choice to kind of distance ourselves from that. It was August of my 8th grade year that I got diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and a little bit of test anxiety, which was why my grades were decreasing too. So that was probably when I first got diagnosed with depression, was when I was probably 14, 15.
14, 15. So the test anxiety, is that classified under the learning umbrella? Is that, it's a processing?
Yeah, it's I just get real anxious and just tighten up, you can kind of say stage fright almost, when you forget lyrics or forget what you're doing. It's kind of the same thing. Like I could know the material going into the test, and then just the idea of the test would really bring me down. And I did what I had studied. So.
Yeah. No, totally. And I definitely have a bit of test anxiety myself, not diagnosed and not to that extent where it's, something that I can't manage. So wow, that's intense. So what was that time surrounding your diagnosis like? Like what was going through your head when you finally got a name for what you had been struggling with for so long?
Right. Well, it's kind of weird. Before I gotten tested, I did a lot of like online tests. Like I kind of knew what was happening, and I really was dreading it. Like I really didn't want to go into the test with the therapist and psychologist and then be told that. So it was really pretty scary. So I really felt like this was going to change my life somehow, like how I was going to live day to day, or I was going to have this big secret that I was going to have to tell people, which wasn't the case. But when you're 14, it felt like a huge deal at the time.
Yeah.
So it was pretty scary how to deal with that.
Totally. And I feel like, it must have been a bit of a help maybe to have a parent who was a therapist and who obviously was seeing people every day who were struggling with depression and things like that. So I did that make your experience any better, or was it actually harder having a parent who really knew all about this illness?
Yeah, well, I think it was a little bit of both, really. I think it was definitely a lot of help having someone that I could talk to at home that could just be that listening person. But it also did feel that I was kind of being watched a little bit more closely, asked a little bit more often, like, how was your day, wanting details, which wasn't a bad, but when you're a teenager, that's not necessarily what you want all the time. But it was definitely a learning curve for both of us. It kind of changed our relationship a little bit and our dynamic on how we worked together for me. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And so for someone who struggles with depression, do you find that it is seasonal? Do you find that it's, it happens in periods, like some days are good, some days are bad? Or is it some months are good, some months are bad? What do you find you're dealing with depression like?
More so now that I've been dealing with depression for, like 10 years, it's more kind of just like happenstance. Like some days are better than others, or like a week is better than others. I wouldn't say I really suffer like month-long periods anymore, which is, God bless, like thank goodness I don't do that anymore. But in the beginning, it was definitely long periods of times. It was somewhat seasonal. I do feel like the effect of having sunshine and like green around me versus, winter time, which I still love winter, but in the beginning, it definitely hurt me a little bit more to not have that sunshine in my life.
Yeah. And for those dark times, for those times when you did find yourself in a period of depression where it's like, oh, this is not sadness.
Yeah.
What is that like? Like, can you describe a little bit about what those emotions are and like how it is different than sadness, how it's more
than really the first word that comes to mind is it's terrifying. And I know I'm smiling now, but it really is such a hard thing to go through. You feel very isolated, very lethargic. You really don't want to do anything. At the time too, I had no interest in continuing with like the theater program that I was a part of, no interest in continuing with, sports and I was a part of. It was really just, I wanted to be in bed 24/7. That's all I wanted, was to be by myself. It's really, I thought of it at the time as like a different side of me almost. Was I was a very outgoing and happy person, and then when I started dealing with the depression, I felt completely different. So it really just felt like a light switch, like was turned on and off sometimes.
And when you're experiencing something like that,
yeah,
which, and I can relate, we've talked about this, it's so hard, it's such a particular emotion. It's almost like, well, it is, it's you feel so empty, it's so much more than just feeling sad, because like you said earlier, sadness passes. Sadness is an emotion that is fleeting, and sadness sadness is normal and it's something that we should experience, whereas depression, that emptiness, that feeling really nothing at all, and really being worried that maybe you're never going to feel anything again. I feel like
Yeah.
also what's so scary is that lack of emotion that's involved.
That was probably the scariest thing to me, and still is the scariest part to me on those days where I'm feeling bad, is just the numbness and the isolation of it. It's something that kind of sticks to your bones almost on like a cold day, and you just don't shake it. It's very much you care about anything, which is scary when you don't care about anything, because that's not who we are as humans.
And when you're in those periods, or when you were in those periods, how did you pull yourself out of them? Like what?
Yeah. I mean, it's scary to think about in the beginning on those really dark days when I was really kind of in the thick of it, and just terrified. It was a lot of, I would go on Pinterest, Instagram, and I look up quotes, and I would just try to redirect my brain as much as possible. And at the time, I really couldn't redirect it on my own. So I would get a journal and a pencil out, or some fun colored pens, and I would just look up like daily affirmations, or like, positive quotes to live by, and just write them down. I would just keep writing them down. And the ones that really stuck to me, I would write on a note card. And I would put it up on my wall where I could see it almost all the time. Just that constant action of, no, like, you're not worthless. No, like, you're not, a waste of space or like a burden on anyone. You really have to redirect and kind of focus on, no, like, people love you. You are enough just as you are. So I would do that a ton, especially in the beginning, just redirecting. And now more so when I'm dealing it not on a daily basis anymore, I still do the same thing. I'll make myself some tea or some coffee, myself some food, something to nourish my body, and just kind of sit down and listen to some good music and something that will lift me up rather than bring me down, and just journal and kind of sit with it now and kind of push past it.
But I feel like now you've gained the skills to know that, okay, this feeling is temporary. Whereas I feel like, just from what I remember, like being there with you during this time, there was a level of uncertainty in that you were like, I don't know if this is going to get better. Whereas now I see you and it's like, okay, I had a bad day. I'm not doing great right now, but I know that this will pass. And I feel like that is such a huge, like, that's like leaps and bounds from where you were. And so, I mean, congratulations on getting to that point, because I feel like that's what's tough, is realizing that this is not forever.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. When you're in the thick of it, those first, I would say really first 5 years, I was diagnosed with it, like throughout high school and a little bit college. I really was like, most days just working through it. And it really is just, it's hard work and it's uncomfortable work. And it's really, you spend a lot of time on yourself, reflecting on yourself, just taking care of yourself. And that sometimes it could feel like I was being selfish, like canceling plans or saying, no, I can't do that. But it really is, you just have to work yourself before you can work on others or help others or work with others. It's just a lot of self-work, self-reflection.
Yeah, dude, you can't give from an empty cup.
No.
And I feel like that's something that you have taught me. Definitely that, it's okay to want to be there for everybody else, but you have to be there for yourself first, because I know that's like that's one of your like mission statements. I feel like in your list of things that like define how you live your life, that's definitely one of them. And that's something that I've held on to. So thanks.
And it took a lot of time to learn that too. I mean, I know for both of us, really, we are both such caring and empathetic people. We want to help people. We don't like feeling sad. We want to just get over it. And really, I think that was one of my, I knew I wasn't myself at a certain point. And trying to find myself again was really hard, because I wanted to continue helping people. I was a part of, so many clubs about, like ADL, like anti-bullying clubs. I used to speak to like elementary school kids about body image and self-image. And it was really kind of put that on a back burner sometimes and not much time on that because I needed to spend the time on myself, really.
Yeah, that you could do that. I there's an amazing quote. It's a Maya Angelou quote, and it's I believe it's develop the strength so that you can stand up for yourself, so that you can stand up for others.
Exactly.
That you can then stand up for others, you know, and I just think you're so right. We have to do that work on ourselves first. We are the starting point of our lives. The way we interact with ourselves it shapes our entire lives. And
Yeah.
you're so right.
I mean, you are always going to be that person that you wake up to and that you fall asleep to. I mean, you don't escape yourself, so you really got to make sure you like who you are and make the choices to be that person that you want to be.
Yeah.
Be the change in the world that you want to see. I live by that.
And I want to get back to this, but I wanted to talk to you about your experience with self-harm. And I know that can be such a taboo subject. It can be something that people are so afraid to talk about. But it's a real thing. It affects so many people. I myself have dealt with it. And yeah, can you talk about that? Can you talk about?
Yeah, I mean, it is a really scary thing to talk about, so I understand why people don't talk about it usually. I mean, even this whole interview, to say the least, I don't open up about this very often, which I think is the reason I wanted to do this in the first place. I think we should be open to talking about it and being vulnerable with ourselves, because only then is like the real growth going to happen. So in those moments of numbness and just really like air, like it's a really dark and cold place where you don't want to be. And I felt nothing. And so I turned to feeling pain, just to almost remind myself that I was alive, that I was here, that I'm breathing. So I guess that was why I did it to begin with. And it almost became a habit, but thankfully I had a wonderful support team that I could talk to constantly. My parents never left me at the house alone at the time when this was happening. The moment I wanted space, but that was really just the depression talking, that I wanted that alone time. And really, God bless them for not giving that to me. But it was a very dark, where I felt like that was the only way that I could feel anything. So,
and thank you for talking about that, because I know that's not easy to be so vulnerable and to share so much of yourself. And so thank you for even being willing to talk about that.
Well, I mean, it's dark, it's heavy, and it's uncomfortable, and people don't want to talk about it, and it's not the prettiest thing to talk about, especially in just open company. But it's something that I think more people who admit it experience. And I think depression is a beast that wants to keep you by yourself, that wants to keep you isolated, because that's when you're kind of the weakest, is when you're so yourself and you feel like you're so alone. And the truth is we are not alone. There are lots of people that are fighting the same battle as you are. And there are a lot more people that you can lean on than turning to that like form of self-hatred almost.
It's definitely a form of self-hatred. And I know from my own experiences with it, I think that's the hardest part now, being in a place where, you know, I am doing so well, and I'm really at peace with myself finally, for the first time in a maybe for the first time ever. But I think the hardest part looking back is realizing how poorly you treated yourself. You know, it's one thing when other people treat you poorly. It's another thing when you treat yourself poorly, and to realize where you had to be in your mind to be able to cause yourself harm. It's hard. Like, it's really hard to think about that. And it's even harder to talk about it and to let people know that, you know, hey, I'm not perfect. I was struggling, and this is what I did, and this is how I coped. But, you know, I got through it, and I'm doing better. But I think it's what people need to hear. People need to feel like they're not alone, just like what you said, because they're not. And, you're right. So many people are struggling with this and dealing with this and are craving someone to tell them, like, I understand you, I see you, and I'm there for you. And so that's why I think these kinds of conversations are important, because even in talking to you about it, it's helping me think about my own struggles. You know, it's helping me to work through what I've been through. And so I hope that like other people hearing this can feel the same way and feel a sense of fellowship.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge part of it. Is I don't want to say I mean, I am fortunate enough, but good bit of my friends going through the same thing I was going through at the same time. So it really did remind me that this isn't me. This is not who I am. This isn't how I am. This is something that I'm dealing with and something that I'm going through and growing from. And that other people are doing the same thing. And it's really scary, but thankfully I did have people to kind of show me that I'm not alone in this battle, and that I had people to talk to that could relate to what I was going through.
Mm.
I think that helped a ton.
Yeah. Talk about your tattoo.
Oh yeah, this is my favorite thing in the world. So I think it started my sophomore year of high school. On bad days, and like I said before, I needed redirection. I would look up quotes to like help myself. And so sophomore year, it became a really big habit of mine to write the word hope on my hand, wrist, or anywhere. Anywhere that I was seeing it, like in school writing, I saw it on my hand while I'm writing, anything like that. It was just a reminder that I've beaten this before, because at that point I had stopped seeing someone and gone back to seeing someone again. And it was just this thing of, I'm strong, I can beat this, there is hope, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. That's not who I am, and that it'll pass. And I later found a great acronym for it that I didn't know at the time. For hope is hold on, pain ends, which really, really resonated with me. I mean, I think the biggest like weapon we can use against depression is that hope. I think when I was in the thick of dealing with depression, it was that nagging feeling of not being enough, like this is never going to end, I'm always going to be sad, I'm always going to be numb to everything. And that's just not the case. That's not, is there is, you know, this other part of life that you're going to discover, that you're going to find, that brings you joy and brings you love and is a place of growth. So I kept on holding on to that hope. And almost a year ago in May, I got this tattoo on my wrist. So I see it all the time that just says hope. And, you know, I think it speaks for itself. It's a sediment to of me overcoming that part of my life, of that darkness. And yes, I still go through it. I still have bad days. I mean, you and I were going to interview yesterday, and I told you, hey, not really feeling good today. Don't think I can open up about this. And today I feel fine. And that's just kind of the sentiment to it of, it's not forever. There is a passing to this. Got to keep holding on to it.
I love it. And I love the tattoo. They did such a great job. And I know you've wanted that.
So
I know you've wanted it for such a long time. So how do you feel? Well, I want to ask, what gives you hope? You know, what really just gives you hope?
You know, at the end of the day, when I'm feeling really bad about myself, when I'm feeling really upset, really overwhelmed, anxious, scared, I think about my family and my friends, and I think about, you know, I have 2 dogs at home, and I have friends that I can call and family I can call, and people that still love me and, you know, want me in their lives. And I think that's a really big part of me holding on for so long when I was battling depression, is there's more to life than just the sadness that's going on with me. So I think hope is that power to go through it and to get out the other side, you know, knowing that I'm stronger than this mental illness that I have.
And what would you say to somebody who is really struggling right now, who's maybe where you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, who's really in the thick of it? What would you say to give them hope?
You know, I want to say it's okay to be scared. it's a really scary thing that you're dealing with. And it's a really scary thing to deal with when you're, younger, when you're 12 through 18 years old. It's terrifying. And that's okay that you're scared. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to emotion. But know that there are people around you may not see it or know it or accept it, but there are tons of people in your corner that you can lean on, that you can call if you're feeling like you want to do something to hurt yourself. There are tons of people that you can call when you're crying in your bedroom or on your bathroom floor or kitchen floor, wherever you might be crying or hurting. There are more people than you might think are there. And I really hope that you reach out to those people, to lean on them when you can't lean on yourself. Huge importance when you're not feeling so strong.
So I guess shifting gears a little bit, what are your thoughts about prescription medication to treat mental illness? I know that there is some controversy surrounding that. What's been your experience? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of controversy. I think some things can be overprescribed sometimes when you're so young. But I mean, my depression is a chemical imbalance in my brain. It's something that's going to be there. And when you're in the deepness of it, you kind of need something to help pull you out. At least I did. And it doesn't work for everyone, but for some people, they definitely need a little bit of help, get a little bit more serotonin, dopamine, whatever, help it function a little bit better in your brain to help you kind of get out of that hole a little bit. I think it can definitely be used for a good thing. I think definitely people need it sometimes.
And did you find that you needed it?
I think in the beginning, I definitely did. I wouldn't recommend going on and off medication so often, but I did it. And in the beginning, I needed it. I really did. I had gotten to the point so far down where I could not pull my anymore. And I think it me stop having such negative feelings, such like gut-wrenching feelings, and helps me start enjoying a little bit more, a little bit more. That was a big part of it. Was I started getting my emotions back. I started laughing. I started feeling happy when someone said something. A bad test grade didn't really affect me as much as it had before. I mean, those things hurt, but I would rather feel upset and sad than depressed. And that was a big factor for me, was I was feeling again after starting to take medication, after taking the right medication, because sometimes you need a few to get it right.
Yeah, totally. It takes a few test runs. That is not the virus. I just want to say I have really bad allergies.
In Warner Robins are the highest point of pollen right now in the world.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yes, I saw that. But I just get scared every time I cough because, people will just look at you like you're the devil incarnate. It's really
crazy times.
But I think you're so right. I think I understand the hesitation towards medication. I have been medicated before, and I don't know, there were times when I was on medication that I didn't feel like myself, and I felt I didn't feel like I was in control of my emotions. I felt like I don't know, I felt like if I was really, really happy, it wasn't real. If that makes sense. Like it felt like it wasn't really me. And that was just my experience. And maybe it wasn't the right one, because it takes a while, I think, for some people to find what works for them. But for me, like I
find the right medication, the right dosage of the right medication.
Absolutely. So I get that. I get that it works for some people, and it also doesn't work for some people. And I feel like we have to do better when talking about medication to not judge someone for their decision, whether it's to take medication or whether it's to not.
Right. I know people that have gone on medication and become a completely different person than before they went on it. Whereas I know some people that were on medication and became a better version of themselves. They became someone that could, deal with life on a day-to-day basis, whereas they couldn't before.
Absolutely.
So I think it goes ways. It's just do your research, talk to your therapist, your psychiatrist about it, find what works for you, and don't take it lightly. It's not just a Band-Aid. You got to put in your work yourself as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. So back to kind of what we were talking about earlier, you know, you were involved in a lot of like anti-bullying clubs, and you
Yeah.
spoke to your peers and to people younger than you about self-acceptance and positive body image. So you know how much I love to talk about that.
I love
What, let me say first, obviously depression affects the way that you feel about yourself.
that. Right.
Obviously struggling with depression shapes your journey to self-acceptance. So
Mhm.
what has that looked like for you? What are some of the struggles that you have faced on that road to loving yourself, and how have you overcome those struggles?
Yeah, I think loving yourself and accepting yourself is definitely a journey. And I don't necessarily believe that journey really ever ends. I would love to say, that I love myself 365 days a year, 24/7, all the time. But the reality is it's more of a spectrum. There's definitely going to be times where I feel a little bit more down on, I wish my body looked like this. I wish I ran that fast. Like, you know, things. I think the important thing is to know that your body is working the way it's supposed to, and that's good enough. Like, you should really be like, I am able to go out for a walk if I want to. I do this and that, and I think that's what it to is loving yourself for the body that you have, not trying to change the body that you have else. And that was a really hard place to come to, and I'm thankfully more there now than say 5 years ago, because I had a really big problem with comparing myself and being over critical of myself with other people. So it's definitely been a journey. It's been that redirection of loving myself versus not loving myself, and just constantly it's a daily battle. You just got to keep thinking about it, keep
Yeah,
thinking positivity.
yeah, and I think something that I've learned and kind of really taking on my platform, which is, it's called Be You, and it's all about, you know, empowering young women to start their journey towards self-acceptance and to really try to create a positive body image. And you know, in doing more work and research with that, I found that researchers say that when women come together to talk about the societal standards that are placed on us, to talk
Yeah.
about the beauty ideal, or essentially like what society tells us is beautiful, when we come together to talk about that and challenge that and talk about ways that we can move past that, it literally makes us feel better about our bodies. Um,
Yeah.
Literally just having conversations like this
Right.
impacting the way that we feel about ourselves in a positive way. So that's why I feel it's so important to talk about things like this.
Right. I think it's definitely, that kinship to people. Like, you're not alone. Like, I don't love necessarily things about my body, so I want to be like that person. Well, that person to them, and they can say, well, I don't like this about my body, but I love this about yours. And it's kind of that kinship, that connection that you make with people of, okay, we're all kind of going through this. We're all kind of struggling with this. And that realization of, I'm enough. Like, my body is okay. It'll be okay. People are going through the same thing I'm going through.
Yeah,
It's that connection with others, I think, really helps.
totally. And I think we as women are stronger together. And um,
Yeah.
I just know for myself, it's really important to me to develop these skills so that one day, if I have a daughter, I can break the cycle and I can give her positive coping mechanisms, and I can help to raise her to love herself, because studies also show that children who grow up with a parent who has negative thoughts towards their bodies, and actively shows that, those children are more likely to develop eating disorders. Those children are more likely to struggle with a negative body image. So I think for me, it's really important to get my stuff together and really find a way to love myself and to love my body so that I can teach my daughter how to.
Yeah, I think it's all about, just loving yourself unconditionally, just choosing to say, I love how my hair looks today, while I can see cellulite on my legs. It's that active choice of praising yourself and spreading that positivity and speaking it into existence, rather than just putting yourself down. I mean, I love, just making gratitude lists, always like just writing down like, oh, I like when I do this, or, just constantly saying my body can do this. And that is great. I love that I'm able to do the things that I can do.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And so do you think, I mean, clearly you're in so much of a better headspace now, and you're, I think, one of the most confident people that I know.
Thank you.
And it's awesome. It's awesome to see someone embrace everything that they are and to love it. And I've always admired that about you. What on a daily basis do you think helps you to really stay conscious about the way that you're talking to yourself? Because I think that's one of the biggest things, how we choose to speak to ourselves.
That is most definitely, I think, the biggest thing was for me, at least, in my opinion, for myself. It was really just the constant, nagging of, oh, well, like I have belly rolls, or like, oh, I can't run as fast as she can. Like this constant thing, and like constantly comparing yourself that people that might be smaller than you. And the truth is beauty comes in all shapes and sizes. As overused as that line may be, it's true. I mean, you do not have to be a size 00 that's a supermodel walking down the runway for like Victoria's Secret to be considered beautiful. You just don't have to. And I think that pushed at everyone really just a lot, that you have to be a certain way to look beautiful. And I really struggled with the idea that people, as I saw myself sometimes, and I think that was one of my biggest turning points, was I realized that people are people. They're not looking at me. They're worried about their own stuff. I can be running on the treadmill at a gym and be self-conscious that like my legs are jiggling. But no one's looking at me, no one's worried about what I'm doing, just as they're worried about what they're doing. And maybe they're thinking the same thing, like, oh, I hope someone doesn't see my flabby arms. Like, it's the constant acknowledgement of people are people. We are equals. No one is better than anyone else. And we all are cut from the same piece of cloth, like I don't need to be worried about what other people are doing, because I'm worried about myself. I'm worried about, what's helping me to get to my next goal, what my goals can be after that. It's just that constant of reassuring yourself that this is okay. And you might fall a couple of times and scrape your knee, but you just got to get back up and keep on trucking, got to keep on going.
I love that. Everything you said is perfect and beautiful and right. So I guess in all of this, like what is a stigma that you would like to break surrounding mental health? Like what's a stereotype that you wish you could just annihilate?
I feel like there's a few. I was thinking about this question a lot. I think a lot of people just assume that you're Eeyore, I think a lot of people think that you're just this negative, like, rain cloud coming about and, like, ruining parties and plans and things like that, when it's not necessarily the case. I mean, I know personally with me, I put on a face a lot for people. I always wanted people to think that I was okay. And I think that's the real lesson in it, is there are people out there that you may realize are going through this hardship, and you could say something to offend them or something like that, but you don't know you're doing that unless they speak up. I think there's a real in all of us just speaking up about our experiences, accepting them, and talking about them, because you never know when something that helps you could help someone else. Like, I really struggled with doing this interview at first, just because I've never really opened up about, self-harm and depression and like the dark, dirty stuff. But ultimately that's kind of what pushed me to do it, because I think it goes back to, be the change you want to see. If I want people to talk about it more, then that starts with me. I need to talk about it more as well. And I think that's where that connectiveness comes from. Like you were saying, like talk with women about, body image and self-image. It comes with all of it. I think you really just got to open up and be honest with each other. Even if it's not the most comfortable thing, like it's going to be uncomfy, and you can be uncomfy for a little bit.
So right. And just wonderfully said. I totally agree. So I guess talk a little bit about how you ended up where you are right now. I know that, you talked about school being challenging for you. Talk a little bit about your decision to leave school and how that's kind of led you to where you are now.
Yeah, so I loved the middle school and high school that I went to. I'm so grateful for the education that I got while I was there and the friends that I made while I was there and the super helpful teachers, the ones that also brought me out and spoke about, your grades are falling when I was working with that or dealing with that depression. But ultimately, I liked school. Like as a societal thing, like I don't like doing homework. I don't like studying. I don't like doing any of that stuff. I love to learn. Um, I love reading books and learning new things and doing that on my own, but I just do not do that well in a classroom setting. I don't test very well. I don't communicate very well, or, like comprehensive things. I just don't do that well. But that doesn't mean that
Really well, by the way, based upon this interview, and I'm really excited for you to see it. You communicate extremely well, but
thank you. Thank you. But when it comes to the classroom setting, I think for me, it was a very negative of my life just because I am so overcritical of myself. I critiqued everything, and it kind of came in a package of I was a perfectionist, but also very bad at procrastinating, which really stressed me out. And I think it was just a negative environment for me to personally be in, which was really scary to that conclusion because I went to a high school that pushed us to go to college because, that's the next step after you graduate high school is you go to college. And I went to college. I went for a year and a half. I went for 4 semesters total because I did summer semesters as well. And I didn't hated it. I was starting to have anxiety every time I had to go onto the college campus.
Didn't like it, hated it.
It wasn't for me. And it was really scary to admit that, especially to my parents that were like, thankfully we're paying for college at the time. And there was this overwhelming feeling that I was letting them down because I wasn't doing well in school. And history of me not doing well in school, like I can remember the first time I ever stopped doing homework was like 3rd grade. So like never for me. And I felt like I was kind of wasting their money in a way that I wasn't doing what I loved. I wasn't doing well enough to be doing it. And it was a really yeah, I was legitimately having panic attacks anytime I had to leave my apartment to go to class. And it was just a healthy environment for me to be in. So I had to, talk with my parents saying that this isn't what I want to be doing. I don't think this is healthy for me. I don't think this is helping me anyway. It was my mom really that put all of those negative feelings to rest. She looked at me and she's like, well, maybe that's not your path. And it was this like profound thing to me that all my life I was like, well, I'm going to college and I have these plans for myself. But those plans that's not working for me now. I could be 12 thinking I'm going to be a rock star and then at 20 realize I'm a rock star. And it was that profound, like earth-shattering thing of this isn't your path. So find another one. Which was really also another scary battle was, okay, well now what do I do? School, I've dropped out at this point. So now what? And it was this beautiful thing of I was anxious for a couple months and then I pulled myself together and I got a new plan, I was lucky enough to be able to go to Wyoming for a few summers. And I worked on a dude ranch out there in Jackson Hole, which was beyond breathtaking, a wonderful experience. I moved in with my parents for like 6 months, and worked a few jobs here in Macon and loved catering. I loved working in this industry and I loved interacting with people that way. And so now I've made the choice where I could potentially start my own catering and event planning business without going to school necessarily. I can learn that in the real world. So it was this great thing of knowing that I don't have to be on the same path necessarily that everyone else. So it was really a great opportunity for me to be able to accept that and then move on.
So your plan is to start your own, it's an event planning company, right?
Yeah, I was lucky enough last year to get involved with a catering group here in Macon, and I absolutely loved it. I love being able to work. I love, kind of the labor of it, like, like loading up the van and heading out and like setting up an event. And I felt important. I felt like I was, helping a person on a big day in their life, whether it was like, like a wedding. I loved working weddings, or even just like office parties. New every time. And I love that I get to be a part of someone's life in that way. So now my thought process is, well, shoot, I love that. Like, let's just go with that. So I'm really working towards, learning everything that I can about the service industry, working as waitressing, working with like event planners, learning all that I can outside of the classroom in the job field, to hopefully, the plan is in the next 5 years, open up my own company myself as the boss.
Well, I have no doubt that you will be able to do that. And I have no doubt. I think you're an extremely capable person, one of the most hardworking people that I know. And yeah, you're definitely a go-getter, and you definitely have a lot of self-motivation, and you've faced a lot of adversity in your life, and you have overcome all that you've
Thank you. Yeah.
so I have no doubt that you will be able to do this as well. And I can't wait. Will you do my wedding? I mean, I don't just, I'm not like engaged. I don't have a guy, but one day I'm like calling dibs now.
Yes, 100%. Anyone that needs me, I will help. But I think that's kind of like the silver lining through all of this, all that we've talked about today, is you go through dark times. You go through places of your life that you're not necessarily proud of, that you necessarily want to live again. But you get through it. You go through it. It shapes you into who you are meant to be. I am a believer that things happen for a reason. You cannot be compassionate and enjoy all the good times without some bad times to compare them to, there are highs and lows that you have to face. It shapes you to who you are in the long run.
Thank you so much. I'm so inspired by you and by your vulnerability today. And I think it's so important that we continue to talk about the hard stuff. And thank you truly for talking about the hard stuff today. And it's been wonderful to hear your story, and just thanks for talking to me today.
Thank you. Anytime.